Hi there, I'm Dan Rhodes, Education Coordinator from the Bradford County Conservation District. So today I'm going to show you what's called the floodplain management model, where I'm going to simulate a few different rainfall events and hopefully identify some things as far as what we can think about and what we can do to try to lower the risk for flooding in the future. Okay, so in order to understand how and why flooding happens today, we first have to go back in time. I want you to think back, all right? In your imagination, think back 300 years ago to the way Bradford County used to be, especially right around Wysocks, Towanda, some of the places that tend to flood a lot. All right, would you see a bunch of roadways? Would you see parking lots? Would you see buildings? 300 years ago? Nope, you wouldn't see any of that. You probably wouldn't even see dirt roads back then. You might find an occasional Indian path, but very, very different. Okay, so first experiment, we have a swamp here, all right, symbolized by these sponges. All right, a swamp or a wetland, basically it's a place where water collects. All right, it holds on to water a lot like a sponge. So that's what these kind of symbolize. All right, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually make it rain onto the model. We're going to see how the wetland area handles all that rain, and we're going to see how fast it releases the water into the river here. Okay, so this is our rainfall simulation tub here. I'm going to pour about, well, almost 3/4 of a gallon of water into the rainfall simulator tub, and we're going to watch and see what happens. You ready? Here we go. Keep watching downstream here to see what kind of water comes down out of the swamp. All right, almost all that water, wow, there's just a very tiny little trickle of water that ended up in the river channel here. All right, most of it all stayed in the swamp because the swamp absorbs water. All right, so now that we have that experiment done, let's fast forward in time 300 years, okay, from the colonial period to modern times. So now instead of having swamps and wetlands and forests and vegetation that can absorb water, we're going to change up the landscape again into this nice parking lot. See? The problem with a parking lot generally is that it's pavement that usually doesn't absorb water very well. We're going to do the same experiment here with the parking lot. We're going to refill the tub with the same exact amount of water. We're going to see the difference in where the water goes. You ready? Here we go. Same exact amount of water. Whoa, look at this. It is a raging flood. Look at all that. Holy cow. All these homes and a tree, they're just washed right downstream. The reason this happened is that too much water was allowed to go from the parking lot to the river in too short of a time span. All right, nothing slowed it down. All right, there was nothing to trap the water, nothing to slowly release it into this channel like it usually did in the past. And so basically it sped the water up. It allowed it to gather a lot of momentum, and that momentum added up to flooding. All right, So let's see what we could do. Let's try to figure out what we could do to try to mitigate the flooding risk here. All right, so experiment number 1 to mitigate the flood risk. All right, we're going to create a levee or a dike that'll go right over this, right over the edge of the river here to try to protect these homes that just got washed away right in here. All right, we're going to see what happens when we do that. Okay, so this time I put up a modeling clay barrier here, symbolizing a levee or a big bank that people build to try to protect communities from flooding. And we're going to see how well the levee protects this bunch of homes from the same amount of water. All right, you ready? Here we go. Look at that. Well, it did protect these homes somewhat, but guess what? The people downstream right here, they just got totally wiped out again because the water level rose really high up to the top of the levee. And it actually, once it got past the levee, it just basically spread out again and wiped out everything down here. So levees, you know, they can help potentially a community to try to prevent flooding, but they're always extremely expensive and they don't always work, especially for the people downstream that don't have the levee. All right, if you notice, the water level it made it to the very top of this levee. If that water had, and it started to actually go back upstream here, and if it had just crested another, maybe 1/8 of an inch here, it would have flooded this whole area, and this would have been a swimming pool, basically, because the water would not have been allowed to escape because of the levee. This actually happened in real life in New Orleans, back when Hurricane Katrina flooded New Orleans. The levees they had in place there were only designed to protect New Orleans from a Category 3 hurricane or weaker. Unfortunately, Katrina was a Category 5 that brought in floodwaters that went right over that levee, and the levee actually trapped water inside the city, made things a lot worse. So levees typically are not the answer because it only helps to speed the water up and destroy somebody else downstream. You never know if the levee is going to be tall enough either to actually protect you. The water can go up and up and up as much as it wants. You can never really predict what level you're really going to get. How high is it really going to get? Who knows? The problem is you can't, the levee doesn't always protect you, and it always hurts somebody else downstream if they don't have one. Okay, so let's try something else. You ready? We're going to do another experiment. So I'm going to take the levee away. This time, we're going to go back to our parking lot. We're going to install an underground water impoundment system. That's what this is, under the parking lot. So if any of you have ever been to the new Tractor Supply in Wysox, they actually have one of these. It's pretty cool. Basically, all it really is, it's a retention pond underneath the parking lot. And it's designed to, instead of allowing all the water to flow off the parking lot really fast, it's designed to capture the water and then slowly release it into the ground or into a local stream or river. All right, so let's see how it works. You ready? Here we go. Now, as you can see, the water filled up the pond underground here, and it's slowly releasing it into the river instead of releasing it all at once. So it's controlling the water a lot more than the original parking lot was. So this actually is a really good idea, and it helps tremendously to slow the water down, to trap it, to get it underground faster so that it doesn't instantly make it into our creeks, into our rivers, and increase the flooding risk exponentially at the same time. All right, so the problem is, you know, it takes a lot of money to build these things, and we have a lot of parking lots, we have a lot of buildings and a lot of roadways. We might not be able to afford to put one of these, to dig up the existing parking lot, put one of these underneath it, and then repave it if the parking lot's already been built. They just built the Wysox Tractor Supply, so they were able to do that before the parking lot went in. But you might not be able to do that everywhere. Okay, so what else can you do? Let's talk about the amount of rain that actually fell. To give you an idea of how difficult this problem is, let's talk about the amount of rain that actually fell in this scenario in Wysox in the 2011 flood. Okay, so I'm going to show you some crazy math here to prove to you how much rain actually fell on Wysox in 2011, the big flood of 2011, and to try to prove to you how unbelievably destructive that rain really is and how hard it really is to manage that amount of rain for flood mitigation purposes. In 2011, Tropical Storm Lee rained down 9 inches of rain on the Towanda. If you go about half an hour north of here to Appalachian, New York, they got 12.7 inches of rain in that one storm. So if you average those two numbers out, you get about 10.85 inches of rain between here and there. It fell during that one storm. But for easy math, let's just use 10 inches for the precipitation estimates here. So according to the USGS, if you have 1 inch of rain that falls on 1 acre of land, you have a total of 27,154 gallons of water that hits the ground. Okay, so if you take that 27,154 gallons and you multiply it by the 10 inches of rain that we received in that one storm, you get 271,544 gallons per acre. Okay, but connecting all these calculations back to the floodplain model, I want to know how many gallons actually fell on all of the impervious surfaces, the parking lots, the rooftops, the buildings, the roadways, everywhere where the water isn't going to sink in like we saw in the model. And if you go on to the Web Soil Survey for USDA, you can actually calculate acreages based on satellite photos. So I went ahead and did that with the satellite imagery, and I calculated about 300 acres of impervious surfaces. So if you take that 271,540 gallons and you multiply that by 300 acres of impervious surface just from the Conservation District office to the Towanda Bridge, okay, you get a total of 81,462,000 gallons of water fell just on those impervious surfaces alone. If you look at the Horseshoe section of Niagara Falls, which is the Canadian side of the Niagara Falls, which is the most powerful section of the falls, has the most water going over it, there's roughly 681,750 gallons of water that go over those falls every second. All right, so if you take the amount of rain that we just calculated fell just within those 300 acres of impervious surface along the Golden Mile here in Wysox. All right, you have 81,462,000 gallons divided by 681,750, and you get 119.4 seconds, or almost exactly 2 minutes of time. All right, it would take, if you took that amount of rain that hit Wysox and you loaded it right into the Horseshoe section of Niagara Falls, and you let it run until it ran dry, it would run. It would go over the falls at full capacity for 2 minutes of time. That is insane. All right, that is an insane amount of water. So Niagara Falls, that whole section of Niagara Falls, would look totally unchanged for 2 minutes of time. Okay, if you dammed up the river and you replaced all the water with just that water that fell on the 300 acres in Wysox during that one storm. Okay, amazing amount of water. That is, that really tells you no amount of levees or dams is going to be able to control that. In fact, it didn't control it during that flood. There were lots of levees that were breached at various places along the river, and the communities inside the levees, and downstream of them really suffered greatly from that flood, just like we saw in the floodplain model. All right, let's talk about what else we can do. Okay, for one thing, we can put the sponges back, the wetlands, all right? We've just spent the last few hundred years draining all the wetlands around here to build things on them. But the more wetlands we have, the more swamps we have, the more water that we can trap, that we can slow down, that we can capture. We can prevent it from getting right into the river and flowing downstream super fast to cause more flooding. We can also put more and more retention basins in underneath the pavement that we put up. All right. That's not always easy to do if you're not building new things, though. That gives you the chance to put it down before you put the parking lot, before you install the parking lot. So it's really up to all of us now, all right, to try to do everything we can to keep every drop of water that falls from the sky on our property, all right? Keep it on your property. If you keep it on your property, then you keep it from loading up really quickly into all the streams and the rivers, the ditches, and you keep it from getting momentum, you keep it from causing more flooding. So anything we can do, plant trees, okay, vegetation. Every time you have vegetation in the ground, in the soil, it helps the water to sink in. It doesn't allow it to flow over the land as quickly, all right? Not just swamps, but trees in general. Will help the rainfall to percolate underground. But yeah, wetlands, swamps, ponds, all those things that capture water. Anything to keep the water where it is and to get it underground faster is going to help us prevent flooding. Besides that, trying to reduce the amount of development that we put in flood zones is probably going to be a good idea. Right? Allowing the water to spread out over a large floodplain area is going to reduce the flooding risk downstream from there. There's not a lot of easy solutions to this problem, and it's probably only going to get worse as time goes on unless we do something about it. So we've really created a lot of issues with water because we've eliminated the ability of the water to slow down. If you wanted to talk more about this and set up a live Zoom meeting with me, please feel free to get in touch. Looking forward to hearing from you. If not, keep trying to use your resources wisely. Thanks so much. Have a good day.